So with that in mind, looking at what CISA has published fairly recently, they make several resources available, and one of them is these trends and industry outlooks and the emerging technology, and what are they seeing, as a government agency with access into this. So the current trends that they're seeing for the last year for critical infrastructure is ransomware targeting OT, supply chain compromise, targeting unpatched legacy devices, and identity-based attacks leveraging MFA misconfigurations. None of that is surprising. These are things that if you've been following this industry for the last decade or so, these are what everybody has been talking about and working towards with critical infrastructure. The only real difference we're seeing is just the speed at which these attacks are coming, but the mechanisms is all the same. For small businesses, talking with CISA, trends over the last year, no surprise, it's ransomware, it's business email compromise, and it's DDoS attacks. What we are hearing from CISA and other agencies for how these attacks are evolving, and that's where we're seeing AI starting to really lower the barrier for the adversaries to increase their frequency and complexity of their attacks. So what we're seeing is the ransomware attacks are evolving way faster than in years past. So the toolkits that are available for companies to either download or the time it takes to develop, they're getting to a point where they are evolving so that every attack is using slightly different code, much easier to evade detection when you're looking at fingerprints. They've got different tooling in place that can set it up to where the scripts and the emails that go with it are completely different, and so it's harder to fingerprint where they're coming from and which group you're really working with, which makes it harder to try to predict their actions. Also, what's changing is with the deepfake audio. We had talked earlier today about some of the more pedestrian attacks that try to trick people into buying gift cards and sending, the Apple code to these attackers, or doing different things like that. Where now we're seeing where not only are they trying to trick companies to wire money, but they'll have an out-of-band connection. So they'll have somebody pretend to be a CFO and then have a person emulating that voice call that person and say, hey, really needing you to do this, to where it seems like an out-of-band confirmation that you're dealing with the right person. And they're going around a lot of our controls that we've set up to say, okay, well, if we've got a request that's out of the normal, you've got to talk to a person directly to validate that it's a real request. So what we're seeing is things are changing, and what used to become science fiction is becoming commonplace these days. We're also seeing more advanced threat actors living off the land. This is kind of a new term, but it's really how things used to be. Used to be when you would get into a system, you look at what tools are there and you do what you could. We went through a renaissance with hacking several years ago, where very sophisticated rootkits and toolkits were being sold that allowed people to really move and set up these command and control environments. What we're seeing evolve over this past 12 to 18 months is more and more attackers are not using as many tool sets. They're really using what's available on the machine or native commands and trying to really evade these detections of things being brought into these environments. Sometimes it limits what they can do, and so you really need to look at your golden images as you're setting up these machines and restrict what toolkits are on them. But it's an interesting battle to fight when they're using the very tools that you need to manage the network when they're using it against you. I had already mentioned the OT ransomware trend that a lot of us have kind of heard about in the news with either power or water or other utilities being disrupted. But what's interesting is we're seeing that the traditional strategy of isolation and containment for these critical systems is falling by the wayside, and these same legacy systems are being coupled with modern IT, um, things that are exposing new vulnerable ways of attacking these legacy systems. So we're having what used to be very isolated control systems moving to the cloud so that they have redundancy and support. But then now we've got these cloud attacks that can then do lateral movement and get into these systems that used to be just cut off. And so it really shouldn't be a surprise that this is an area ripe with innovation. But if we even look back at Stuxnet, it was developed as a virus that would utilize USB transmission in a time when these ICS controllers um, were really not utilizing USB, but it was written in such a way that it only activated when it hit devices with a known serial number range. The other insight that CISA offered for how things are changing and new developing fields is something called hybrid warfare. So we've heard in the news a lot about cyber warfare and countries that are using it as a way of either disrupting other countries or getting different things to happen that are in their way. What we're seeing, especially in Ukraine, is where both sides are leveraging every possible technology they can find, and each side is just stepping up the ladder and figuring out a way how to stop it, and then they try something new and the other side figures out a way to stop it. And what we're hearing from the government agencies is that in the future, if something were to happen, we're not necessarily going to see the large infrastructure disrupted by this cyber warfare. We're going to see things, not only the critical infrastructure, but also think about healthcare, gas stations, part suppliers, local public services. All of these play a big role in the local economies.